Hey guys, you're about to watch episode 10 of the Eskandy Sports Podcast. But before we begin the pod with Dan Dickau, our great guest, I just want to acknowledge that I am pretty stupid, like severely dumb. Uh, no, but it never occurred to me. So Dan Dickau he is currently a commentator for ESPN covering college basketball. So, given the time, which was a week before March Madness, a week before the craziest March Madness, it would have made a lot of sense to, ask about college basketball and March Madness and things that could happen. But, your boy didn't go that way. We talked about the NBA experience. I thought we had Todd McCulloch on earlier who had some NBA experience, but really didn't dive into what it's like to be an NBA player. So I thought, wow, Dan Dickau, 6-year vet, played in the NBA. Let's learn about what the NBA was like. But it's March, and it's March Madness, and his job right now is college basketball. But yeah, still a really good podcast. We do talk about his Final Four predictions and what he thinks is going to happen in the tournament very briefly towards the end. But to the tens of you that are going to see this, I'm sorry. All right, episode 10, Dan Dickau. Enjoy. How's it going, everyone? You're watching and listening to another episode of the Eskandy Sports Podcast. Our guest today is a former NBA player, current ESPN broadcaster, barbershop owner, has a Skills Academy, has his own podcast on SB Live, sports network called The ISO with Dan Dickau. He's got another podcast on the field of 68, and he's going to go over pretty much the ins and outs of being an NBA player. So without further ado, how are you doing, Mr. Dan Dickau?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I know that was a lot to mention that I'm involved with. Some days it feels like I've got way too many things going on, but I guess that's a good thing because you're kind of striving to continue to be better. You're striving to learn new things. You're striving, in my case, with a few of those, to hopefully make an impact. And that's with the barbershop, providing jobs. That's with the basketball academy, helping kids with the game of basketball. And then the other stuff just keeps me around the game and doing what I've loved to do ever since I was a little kid. And that's anything to be around the game of basketball.
Well, we're just really happy to have you here, regardless. And I messed up when I was typing it out. I put all the B words together and all the S words together and all the D's together. So it was just it was a tongue twister. It was never going to come out clean. So
all good. I have had that issue before as a broadcaster too, and I'm calling games, and sometimes the alliteration gets you, and it's a hard thing to get away from.
We'll learn. So yeah, like I said before, we want to kind of go through, I guess, maybe the unspoken parts of the NBA that maybe the average fan doesn't get to notice, right? We had Todd McCulloch, a friend of yours, on the podcast before, and we were kind of outlining his journey, but we didn't get too much into, what's it really like to be in the NBA. And I think a good place to start is probably draft night. So how was your draft experience?
My draft experience, both pre-draft leading up as well as draft night, was kind of a foreshadowing of how my playing career in the NBA was going to be. So grew up in the Northwest, just outside Portland, Vancouver, Washington. Every time I would say Vancouver, people would think I was Canadian. So I ended up just saying, "Hey, I'm from Portland." So that would save a lot of confusion right there for a lot of people that didn't know exactly where Vancouver, Washington was. But after my college career ended at Gonzaga, I decided to choose an agent, and Mark Bartelstein, Priority Sports, based out of Chicago. So I moved back to Chicago to prepare for the NBA draft and use that as a home base. And I had about 17 or 18 different pre-draft workouts at different places with different teams. Actually, I had one with Toronto. I thought I was going to be drafted by Toronto. They ended up choosing Chris Jeffries instead. They wanted me to work out on the second for a second time the morning of the draft, but the way my schedule worked out, there was no chance that I would have been able to make it back. Um, so that's kind of my Toronto story or connection with the NBA right there. But kind of bounced around with a lot of pre-draft workouts, a lot of busyness, meeting organizations, competing against guys in workouts. And then draft day happens. And, you know, every kid or every player in that situation, the goal is to be a first round pick because you get a guaranteed contract with the amount of years as well as guaranteed slotted money. At that time, it was guaranteed 3 years with an option on the fourth. Mm-hmm. Second rounders aren't guaranteed anything, and so that was really the first big goal is be a first round pick. And where we kind of felt that I was slotted was anywhere from about 17 to 24, 25, somewhere there in the draft, with an outside chance that maybe a team a little bit higher, I believe it was 13 or 14, who I had to work out for, and it went well, might have had a chance. But pretty quickly, we knew that wasn't going to be the case, because every draft year somebody goes a little higher or somebody begins to slide, based off of where everybody kind of projected them or predicted the draft to work out, and that was no different than our year. So once we kind of get into those late teens, start paying attention a little bit closer, and my agent's on the phone calling me, and all of a sudden things aren't looking good, because all these different teams that I had worked out for all of a sudden went in different directions, and so you start to get a little I don't want to say nervousness, but a little bit of like, okay, what's going on here? Where am I going to fall? When's my name going to get drafted? Because it's something you're so passionate, you worked your whole life for, and you're right there on the cusp, but it's not quite happening yet. And knowing you want to be a first round pick, so once we got kind of into the early 20s, my agent said, "Look, these other teams you didn't work out for, they've already committed to drafting other guys. I still think you're going to be a first round pick, but this is what it looks like it's going to happen." And he said, "I think Atlanta is trying to trade up into the draft to pick you." I said, "I've never worked out for Atlanta." I said, "I know we didn't go work out for Atlanta because they didn't have a first round pick, but you're very high on their board from the start, but they didn't think you'd have any chance to be where they could get you, so they never brought you in." And so from about 23 all the way to the end of the first round that year, there was 28 teams that drafted. Atlanta tried to make a trade with somebody. And finally, the last pick of the first round, Sacramento Kings agreed to trading their pick to Atlanta. So they drafted me for Atlanta and then traded. And that was a huge relief. But again, little did we know that, the traveling of the pre-draft and then kind of the uncertainty of draft night would lead to an NBA career, which I look back on with a lot of memories and a lot of pride. But it also, as I said, foreshadowed moving a lot, getting traded a lot.
Yeah. Is it hard to enjoy the draft? Because Todd said the same thing. He had expectations, maybe late first round, and it didn't pan out. And same with you. He still got the first round pick in there, but it feels more like anxiety than enjoyment at that point. Is there anything about that process that you do remember fondly, other than the nervousness?
Yeah. No, I mean the pre-draft process, going to the workouts was great. I loved it. I mean, you had a chance to meet so many people in the NBA at the time before you're actually in the NBA that you always wanted to. I remember having conversations with Jerry West, Joe Dumars, Isaiah Thomas, all these different guys during the draft process, and just kind of just listening to the conversations, before and after the workouts, before and during the meetings, and just trying to soak that up and learn. But I think as far as was there anxiety, not necessarily, because I knew that I did everything I could to be on the doorstep of my dream to play in the NBA, and I knew there was nothing else that I could do. But I guess there was excitement of wanting it to happen as soon as possible. So I don't think anxiety would be the word I would describe. Just more excitement and kind of uncertainty, because you're still with it. uncertainty, you're still excited. I think with anxiety, you're
Okay.
kind of a little stressed out and nervous.
Understandable for sure. And like you said, you did get traded on draft night, and like you said, it foreshadowed uh, maybe more trades in your future. So I have it that you've been traded 8 times, including draft night. What's something that is just like underrated about the getting traded process? Like, what's something that people don't talk about on ESPN or on other
Yeah.
networks that really goes into getting a trade, like getting up and moving?
Well, I mean, I think the hardest part about a trade, um, well, first thing about NBA and trades is everybody is tradable,
Mhm.
unless you're locked in as one of the two or three absolute main core guys on a team. There are conversations that go on every single day in the NBA amongst different teams about availability of guys, or sometimes guys in the front office will just throw out a random idea to see if somebody bites on it, to see if a player is available in a trade. And so I think there's a lot more conversations go on than the average fan would understand. I would say, you know, probably less than 5%, I think is the number I've heard from another front office person, that less than 5% of the trades that are proposed ever happen. And
Right.
that's even just proposed. That's not even the thought process of
Right.
things that go on a day to day about, hey, we like this guy on that team. What would we need to do to get him on our team, or what would we have to give up on our roster to get him? So that stuff happens all the time. I think the hardest part of being traded isn't necessarily the basketball stuff, because usually that comes easy. You've got a built-in kind of infrastructure of a new team and a new place to go to every single day. The hardest part would be, learning the playbook. But once you get to a certain level of basketball, it's very similar. There's just a few tweaks here and there, and mostly it's with terminology. The hardest part is really when you have family and you've got to tell your wife, got traded, we got to pick up and move again, because
Yeah.
you're on a plane the next day, 24 hours later. You got to find out and figure out all the details for the rest of your family, and many times that means them figuring that out on their own, which is very difficult.
And so when you get traded, and like you said, you're on the plane the next day, does family come with you right away, or is there like separation period that kind of doesn't get talked about?
It depends. It really depends. So, the first time I got traded as a player, not right after the draft, was
Mhm.
it was my second year in the NBA, and my wife and I were going to be flying from Atlanta back to Portland anyways, because that's where we were living during the off season. So we were flying back anyways. It just so happened that the night before we were going to fly back on All Star break, I got traded, and we got traded back to Portland. So that was the easiest trade of all of them, was the
Mhm.
fact that we already had a flight booked
Yeah.
heading home, and we already had a place to go, and family and friends there. The weirdest, the hardest one would have been being traded from Dallas to New Orleans, because New Orleans, when I got traded there, they were 1-13, and there was a kind of uh, a part of them that they were figuring out what the heck they wanted to do with their roster. And so they actually said, don't bring your family, because we don't know how long you're going to be here. Meaning, I might get traded again in the next week. I might get waived in the next week after a couple practices or games if they didn't like what they saw. But that wasn't going to work for myself. That wasn't going to work for my family. So what we did is I actually bought my wife, and we had a little one at the time. We bought them a flight to fly over later that day to get to New Orleans for my first game with the Hornets at the time. But those two are probably the most unique trade experiences, because one, I was going home to an already prepared house and setup, and the second one was completely going in blind, to a new situation, a new city, and my wife and family had to travel separately.
You touched on two destinations that you were at, Dallas and New Orleans in particular. Dallas, there's uh, an infamous story, I guess you could say, that happened there. Well, there's two that I want to get into. One, there's the Dirk story that I don't think my generation really knows about, but that's a pretty cool story. Could you tell us about that one?
Yeah, so I had a short stretch in Dallas, and by short stretch, it was 4 games
Mhm.
in the regular season, but I was on the injured reserve for quite a while because we had such a loaded roster. And I was there, a month before training camp, the whole training camp. So I was in Dallas for close to 4 months. But, the thing about Dallas is there's so many good people, and there were so many good guys on the roster at that time. And I have always bought into the belief that, it's your best player or best two players that kind of set the example, set the tone. And for Dallas, that's Dirk. He's such a good guy.
Mhm.
He works harder than anybody. He's as prepared as anybody. He's obviously one of the best players in NBA history. But
Mhm.
he also does a great job of including everybody and making it feel like a team. So early in the season, there's a number of us that were going to go to dinner. We were on the road. We were in Miami. There was maybe 7 or 8 of us. We were gonna take a couple taxis, go to a restaurant. Well, the first taxi comes, guys jump in the taxi, they head off. Last two guys to jump in the second taxi was myself and Dirk. And uh, hey, I said, "Hey Dirk, why don't you get in the front?" He's like, "No, you go for it." So it's a van taxi, front seat is normal, slider door in the rear,
Yeah.
and so I just get into the front seat without thinking anything. I slam the door, and I feel a tap on my would be my left shoulder. Dan, open the door. And I don't think anything of it. I was like, no, man, come on, let's go. And he goes a little louder. Dan, open the door. I said, oh, what? So I turn and I look over my right shoulder, and Dirk Nowitzki's hand is slammed in the taxi cab front door, and his finger, like the door is actually
Uh,
closed, and his hand is stuck, and his fingers are sticking out into the inside of the car. So I quickly open up the door of the car, and he gets out, and he's shaking his hand out, and he's cursing in German, and luckily our the trainer for the Mavericks was in the back of the taxi van as well, and so he looks him over real quick. We go to dinner as a group. He's icing his hand the majority of the time. I'm sitting in almost utter silence because I don't know what the heck's going on. Thankfully, nothing was broken. And the next day, we go out to Miami, and we play the Heat, and I think he scored like 41 points. I think I had
yeah.
1 point that night. So that's
Combined for
my NBA
42.
sports story.
uh, that's awesome. There's also another thing I read up on about you in Dallas, and you really credit what happened during that training camp with being a big boost for you um, for later on. Do you remember anything in particular that happened during the Dallas training camp that you kind of just bottled up and took moving forward?
Yeah. So when I how I got to Dallas was I was initially with Golden State, and there
Hmm.
was a big trade. Eric Dampier, myself, and I think one or two other guys to Dallas, and Dallas had also made some other trades that summer. They brought in Jerry Stackhouse. They brought in Jason Terry. So there was a pretty big overhaul of the Dallas roster built around Mike Finley and Jason and Dirk. So um, there was a lot of new guys on the roster, and it was looking as if, well, it wasn't looking as if it was. I was the odd man out. I mean, because in the NBA you get a certain amount of roster spots, and I was clearly the guy that there was not a direct path or opening on the roster for. So I knew going into training camp that I had to play my best, and so Avery Johnson had signed a contract as a player slash coach. That day or for that season with Dallas. And so, as a player in the situation I'm in, you don't think about anything other than putting your best foot forward every single day, working hard, uh, playing well in practice, taking advantage of the minutes you get in the preseason. And so I did that, and I played extremely well. Actually, I played really well, maybe as well as I'd ever played up until later that year with New Orleans when I got a chance to play big minutes. But I played really well, and I remember Avery Johnson called a team lunch. After practice one day, so we all go to the restaurant, and it's set up in a back room, and Avery starts off the lunch and basically just tells all the guys that, hey, I'm retiring. This is the right thing for me in my career, as well as it allows guys who deserve an opportunity the chance to further their career. And I don't remember the exact words, but it was something along those lines. And as he was talking, I knew he was talking about myself, because he knew he was really focused in on the coach side as opposed to the player side with the preparation and the everyday work. And without speaking for him, I'm pretty sure he knew that I had put in everything I could to make the team or be one of the guys on the team, and that an opportunity would be taken away from myself if he was playing. So that's kind of how I extended my career in year 3 in Dallas. And as with any athletic opportunity or sport, when you get an opportunity, you got to make the most of it. I did in that training camp. I stayed prepared, even though I didn't get a lot of minutes when I was with Dallas. But all that preparation and all that work paid off for when they did trade me to New Orleans, and I really finally got a chance to play a lot of minutes.
You had a big season in that. They were the Hornets at that time, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, you had a big season one year there too. I believe it was, I want to say 13 points, handful of assists. So it's it's a good break that you got there. And it's just crazy how little details like that probably most people don't know about really lead to things down the road in the NBA. Um, Another thing I wanted to talk about. Let's see. I'm gonna have to pick and choose the topics here pretty quickly. So, how calculated is like each movement on an NBA court? Because I don't know if you've seen this. It was like a semi-viral. I want to say it was a tweet that I saw it on. It was just Lloyd Pierce talking to a reporter and
Mm-hmm.
saying like, are you familiar with the clip? They're just talking
Yeah,
about
no,
like,
and it was about a week or so before he got fired by Atlanta,
right.
which to me was ridiculous. I thought he was doing a pretty good job, but no, his comments, the one I think you're talking about, where he rattled off about 15 or 20 things that
Right.
needed to be done on a certain possession on the defensive end to make a possession work. That's exactly how it works in a locker room and in a practice setting and in a timeout, talking about all of the little intricacies that go on within a small possession in a game, all the things that have to be done correctly. One breakdown in any of those things that he had talked about leads to an easy opportunity for the offense. And right now, the way you're seeing it, the way the offenses are spaced, have the advantage with fouls and everything. If you give the offense a little bit of advantage, it is hard to stop them.
Yeah. So, but it just goes to show that there's not as much randomness as we think probably in the NBA game. Even the most finite details, those are practice, those are scripted, those are like very intricate points. Because I'd like to think I know a little bit about basketball. I probably understood 30% of what he was talking about in that clip. I'm gonna try to link it in the video here so people know what we're talking about. But it was lingo I've never heard of.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, the thing is I call college basketball games as a broadcaster, and there are some really good teams that play at times like an NBA team, and Gonzaga is the first one to come to mind, that they play out of concepts and they play freely. But it's really they play freely in that way, just like it looks in the NBA, because of all of the concepts and excuse me, the situations that have been practiced, talked through, worked through in film sessions, in practice situations, in shoot around settings. All that stuff is walked through, detailed out, and explained. And the game of basketball is all about creating an advantage, one way or the other, either offensively or defensively. And offensively, right now, is where the game's trended to really maximize things. And so, offensively, you're looking for one little advantage. And so, if you're getting the defense out of position one way, if you've talked through everything and if you've got great concepts that have been worked through, defense goes there. My slip action on a screen is here, or the angle that I set a screen should be here, or the defense is slightly out of place in one way, my cut takes me here. And it's one of those things that, a lot of people would think that the NBA game is free flowing, and it really is to a certain extent, but it's free flowing with concepts about this is the initial look that we're going to start with, and it can become this, or this. And if it goes this way, these are my reads. If it goes this way, these are my reads. If it goes this way, these are the reads that I look for. So, there's a lot more that goes into it than the average fan understands.
I want to ask one more question, and we're gonna go into the rapid fire, and hopefully wrap this up at a reasonable time. So, um, the NBA obviously had their bubble last summer. Um, how do you think you would have fared in like a bubble situation, or what are some of the considerations people don't really, think twice about when it came to that sort of circumstance?
Yeah, I understand, and I know why the NBA did it. I mean, it's a $1 billion industry, and they really needed to finish the season. They're doing as good a job as they can this year to keep the season on. I know there's been some postponements of games that will have to be made up, but to be in a bubble for that long, away from your family and away from um, kind of your normal world, your normal routine is very difficult. The fact that the guys bought in and made it work is admirable. I'm just glad that the U.S. we're starting to finally what it looks like is to get through this.
Hmm.
Not sure what Canada is looking like right now, but I would imagine it's very similar,
Hopefully.
where we're starting to see positive trends and positive things kind of allowing us to get back to sports, sports with fans, and hopefully before too long, all of this will be behind us.
Right. And I think it's not a coincidence that the two teams in the finals were a very headstrong Heat team by collective and a LeBron James led team that were kind of able to probably help navigate those waters. So we're gonna do a segment that we like to do here called Not So Rapid Fire, but for the sake of time, we're just gonna be rapid fire. All
Sounds
right.
good.
So just a few questions here, and then we'll get going. So right off the bat, what was your favorite NBA destination to rather visit or that you've played for? Not as team aside, basketball aside. What was just a nice place to visit?
Um, well, I never thought I would want to live there, but when I played for the Clippers,
Hmm.
Los Angeles was great. You find a little pocket, neighborhood you want to live in, and it's not as big and daunting of a city as you would expect. So I really enjoyed LA. I did like getting up to Toronto. I thought it was an awesome city. The only problem is we always ended up being there when it was 10 degrees,
Yeah.
and to get out of the hotel I'd have to kind of navigate the underground tunnels to kind of do some different things. But I thought Toronto was a great city as well.
Yeah, I think All Star Weekend there was maybe a mistake a couple of years ago. I think it was like our coldest week ever. What was the craziest trash talk you've heard on a court during a game, and was it from KG?
KG, I don't think directed anything directly at me, but he directed it at the entire team. I mean, he was a guy that nonstop was talking. I mean, I remember there was a couple occasions, I can't remember which team I was on. They had like a three-quarter court press, and he's at the top, and he's set 7'1" with a wingspan. And I'm bringing the ball up the court, and he's got this look in his eye like you're going nowhere, and he's talking not just at me but just in general, clapping his hands, getting down in his stance, getting wide. So I do remember that about KG. I think another one would have been Gary Payton, where he just kind of looks at you and he kind of cocks his head to the side and then he backs you down. Same as Sam Cassell. Talking trash the whole time as he's backing you down. Those would be a couple things that kind of pop out quickly.
So like we said, you did play for several organizations, and you had several jersey numbers as a result. 12, 7, 21, 2, uh, 20, and 10. We're going to take 21 out because I know all your socials end Dan Dickau 21. What was your favorite jersey that you had? One that just like looks nice, or the number maybe grew on you?
Yeah, so I picked 12 when I was in high school because John
Mhm.
Stockton was my favorite player growing up. Obviously, I had that at University of Washington.
Mhm.
At Gonzaga, you weren't getting that, so I had to flip
Yeah.
it to become 21. And so I've always tried to keep a one or a two in my jersey number if possible. So those numbers that you mentioned, probably 20 with the Celtics, just
Yeah.
because it's such an iconic jersey.
Yeah.
Um, anytime you can see your name and a number in your jersey with the Celtics is pretty cool.
Spin off of that question. Which stint do you think you had the best hair during? Because you've gone through several styles.
Yeah, well, I know that my rookie year, my hair was pretty darn bad at the time. But you live and you learn. You kind of go with the flow. You let things kind of be as a young guy. The odd thing is now you mentioned it in the intro. I own some barbershops, so
Yeah.
I was kind of known for my hair in college, and it kind of grew into an opportunity where we live now. Spokane is where Gonzaga is, and
Yeah.
so I own 4 barbershops, and I keep my hair much more trimmed up these days because of TV work than I did back when I played.
Um, what do you think prime Dan Dickau would average in the current NBA? Just a quick points, rebounds, assist stat line.
Wow. That's a hard one because the best year that I had, as you mentioned with New Orleans, I averaged 13 points, 5 assists a game. But as a team, we didn't even average 90 points a game. The NBA then was a real slow it down half court game. There were times where there were games I wouldn't even shoot a three. Where now you're looking at it, you got backup point guards that come into the game and they're averaging 5 3 attempts a game in about 10, 11 minutes. I'm like, I would love that. So to put a number on it is hard, but I mean, if you look at the over.
Oh, I think we lost you for a second here. Hopefully he gets back. Oh, sorry, Dan, we lost you for a second
Okay,
there.
no,
So,
no worries. So where'd you lose me? We're in the middle of that answer.
you were talking about how there's going to be more possessions. Guys are coming off the bench,
Okay.
getting 5 attempts.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, you look at the game nowadays. You got backup point guards averaging 5 6 3 attempts a game, where the amount of possessions and the focus on being able to shoot the three is so much greater. I would have loved to have played in this era. I don't want to put a number on it because a lot of it depends on which team you're at and who's
Right.
ahead of you in the rotation or different things. But I would have loved to play in this style of game.
I'm giving you like a 19 and 7.5 type thing.
I love it. I
If
love
we're
it.
running and gunning, that's where I have you at. Also, like, just yeah, I think you'd be running it really well. So my last rapid fire question. What do you think? Give me a blind Final Four prediction. I know the bracket's not official yet, but what do we think? Gonzaga.
Gonzaga,
Yep.
Baylor. I really like Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to give you a dark horse in Alabama. I think the way that they
I
play
like it.
offensively, they play up and down, they play fast, they play free, and defensively, they create a lot of havoc. So I know Michigan looks good, and it's hard to go against them. I know Ohio State looks good; it's hard to go against them. But those are my 4.
Awesome. Hey, we're gonna have to do this again sometime. Thank you so much for taking the time and speaking to us and telling us about the NBA experience a little bit. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Hopefully, you and your family are doing well up in Canada.
Appreciate that so much. Thank you.